Well, good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to today's Flat World Knowledge webcast, shining a light on textbook affordability, emerging solutions in Ohio. I'm Sharon Cook, and I'll be your moderator today. We just have a few announcements before we begin. On your screen, you should see the GoToMeeting control panel. By clicking the orange arrow, you can open and close your control panel. From the View menu, you can also set the control panel not to auto-hide when inactive if you prefer to keep it open. In addition, you have your audio pane, which provides audio information. If you prefer, you can join the audio via telephone by selecting the telephone radio button and then calling in using the numbers provided. There's a question pane that we're going to be using throughout the presentation today. We do ask that you submit questions at any time that we will answer at the end of our presentation. If you have technical questions, you can also submit those through the question box, and we'll help you with any difficulties that you may be experiencing. And then finally, everyone will receive an email within 48 hours with a link to view a recorded version of today's session. So now let's move on to the presentation, Shining a Light on Textbook Affordability, Emerging Solutions in Ohio. Discussing today's topic today is Darlene McCoy. Darlene is the Associate Vice Chancellor for Affordability and Efficiency. Ms. McCoy has a distinguished public service career as the former Director of the Ohio Civil Rights Commission and the Chief of Staff for former Mayor Michael White of Cleveland. She most recently served as a partner in the law firm of Calfee, Halter & Griswold, LLP. We also have Dr. Steve Acker with us today. Steve Acker serves as the Research Director on the eTextOhio Ohio Digital Bookshelf, a project jointly conceived by OhioLink, the State Library Consortium of 89 members, and the University System of Ohio. This project focuses on strategic use of digital learning materials to reduce student costs and improve learning outcomes. Dr. Acker is an emeritus professor at The Ohio State University, where he held joint appointments in the School of Communication in the Department of Design. Also joining us today is Eric Frank, President and co-founder of Flat World Knowledge. Eric has a 13-year track record of success in higher education publishing. He's held positions in sales, editorial, and marketing at Thomson, now Cengage, and was most recently the Director of Marketing for a division at Pearson Education, Prentice Hall. And finally, I'd like to introduce Dr. Sue Schiller. She was an assistant professor of information systems at Wright State University. She holds a PhD in business administration from the Fox School of Business and Management at Temple University. Dr. Schiller's research focuses on virtual worlds, virtual teams, and computer-mediated communication. Dr. Schiller is the recipient of the 2008 National Award of Innovative Excellence in Teaching, Learning, and Technology, and she also received the SOCHI Southwestern Ohio Council for Higher Education Teaching Excellence Award in 2009. So welcome, Darlene, Steve, Eric, and Shu, and welcome to all of you for our presentation today. At this point, I'd like to turn the floor over to Darlene to begin today's presentation.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here. When Eric Fingerhut was appointed Chancellor for the higher education in Ohio, he created a system called the University System of Ohio so that all schools will be able to work in tandem as opposed to in silos. One of the things that Eric was committed to was to making sure that every student, every person who wanted to get a degree should be able to get that degree and that it should be affordable. As a result of that, he began an ongoing effort to try to see how we could make education more accessible and more affordable. Today I'm going to talk about textbook affordability. What we do in textbook affordability is to try to come up with a cafeteria plan of educational resources that faculty and students can use in order to avoid paying the high cost of textbooks. This is part of an ongoing effort to make sure that we have academic excellence through appropriately academically sanctioned resources at a low or no cost fee. So we've worked with a lot of people in the to determine what the entire universe is of affordable educational resources. These resources can be free or no cost because the faculty member created them themselves, or they can be an e-book, or they could be a combination of both, or things online that faculty create to use as resources and teaching instruments. We understand, though, that textbooks are never going to go away 100%. So what our goal is with the University System of Ohio is to identify the entire field of available educational resources and make all of those resources available to students who want to have the option to use something in the alternative to a textbook. Our largest growing population of students at this point are students that are coming back to school mid-career, ages 25 to 36. So in tandem with our electronic resource effort, we have to make sure that those students are well-versed in how to use computers so that they will have the option and feel comfortable with choosing an electronic option and feel comfortable learning with an electronic option. Then we also have to make sure that as we proceed that the students complete their courses and graduate with a degree. Because if students come in and complete their courses and graduate with a degree, we have more degree people in the state of Ohio, which goes to the economic development and economic status of the state of Ohio. Now, Steve is going to talk more about exactly where we're going in terms of faculty involvement and what we're going to be doing in the next few months to continue to move this effort forward. Steve?
Thank you, Darlene, and thanks to all who are joining us for this next hour. I want to start off by just highlighting the fact that, like many other states, Ohio understands much of its future is associated with improving the education of those in our state, and our goal is to have 200,000 new graduates over the next 10 years. Towards that end, we feel our population needs to improve academic preparation, both in terms of underlying knowledge and study skills, affordability, where Darlene has been discussing our efforts to date, and engagement. And the useful thing to keep in mind is that all three of these are related to learning materials, or in the case of this webinar, textbooks. Even though affordability is a key goal of all of our work, it's really the denominator for this idea of value. We think that the value of learning materials is more about the improvement of learning outcomes than the cost of the text. But if you can drop the cost of textbooks and improve the learning outcomes, both of which we think that the flat world knowledge model can help us do, that's the way that we get the double win that we need to reach our goal. I'm going to give you a very brief history of what we are trying to do with this, assuming I can get there we go. You can see that we began in April 2009. Our chancellor convened an affordability summit in downtown Columbus at Columbus State Community College, and the stage was full of publishers and students and bookstore managers and academics. And the most telling story of all was from a student at Columbus State whose inability to finish her education came about because the cost of her education exceeded her means. She had to pay her utility bills, care for her child, and I think that left an enduring impact on the chancellor and all of us in the audience. And from that came a commission that established a strategic plan for textbook affordability in November of 2009. And that group introduced 6 fundamental premises on which our work is based, and we'll share those in our NING, and we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. But the principal conclusion was, let's take a discipline, and in our case psychology, which is especially interested in the processes and theories of learning, and see if they can convince one another of the benefits of digital learning materials as a way to broaden the learning outcomes of their students. So in April of 2010, we had 17 faculty from around the state and Jeff Nelson from the Bowling Green State University bookstore in the basement of 35 Chestnut. And there we agreed to form a community, which is that address underneath the word Ning, ohiodigitalbookshelves.ning.com. We hope you'll all care to join us. And at that meeting, we agreed on the following things: that our traditional publishing partners should find ways to offer to Ohio students discounts in the digital realm of up to 70% of the 20 leading textbooks in psychology. And forward from that premise, we took the discounted price, and in July of 2010, each of 5 traditional commercial publishers, Cengage, McGraw-Hill, Worth, Bedford Freeman Worth, John Wiley & Son, and Pearson, came and made presentations to over 100 faculty concerning their offerings in the digital realm. In August and September of 2010, these faculty from 23 of our schools agreed to put onto their syllabus a direct statement associated with the access to digital learning materials. So for this coming academic year, which includes the autumn, spring, and summer terms, at least nearly 50,000 of our students in introductory psychology, out of the 70,000 students who take that course in Ohio every year, will have easy access to a discounted digital version of the textbook. And we will let you know how things go as we go forward. From this point, this is what we hope to do next. Over the next several months, we'll be looking at the engagement, efficacy, coverage, and accuracy of traditional textbooks, an open educational resource textbook from Flat World authored by Stranger, and the open internet. And this project is being done by Dr. Charlie Ginn at the University of Cincinnati and 11 of his honor students in psychology. So we think that student voice in terms of these attributes, along with the contribution of a seasoned faculty member, should give us some very interesting data. In addition, and those of you who work with faculty in business, the life sciences, and perhaps chemistry or economics, we're going to be holding focus groups for year 2 disciplines to extend beyond psychology. And then November, December, we'll bring together our publishing partners, including Flat World, to discuss ways in which we can meet these educational needs of our students. Starting in the following year, we have a grant from Rehabilitation Services to focus on accessibility, and in that is included mobile applications. And accessibility is our #1 principle on which all our work is done. We feel it's critical to not only serve our print-disabled students, but to provide the fundamental underlayment for universal design of learning. And we're going to bring in our bookstores and focus groups too, because we recognize their critical role in reaching our students and meeting their academic needs. In March of 2011, the adoption decisions will be made in all of our courses at all of our campuses, and we'll begin the process of identifying the texts that we'll be using for the coming year. We'll have a follow-up workshop in July of 2011, available to faculty in Ohio. And in 2011, we'll launch our second group. So to summarize what we're calling the Leroy model, the Learning Return on Investment model, year #1 has been focused on incremental changes to the traditional model that exists between publishers, bookstores, faculty, and students. This is the largest population, and incremental change there can bring tremendous system-wide benefits to our students. Year 2, we're engaging the open educational resource movement, and Flat World is a leading proponent and advocate of this area, and we're delighted to be working with them, and you'll hear momentarily from Eric Frank about what Flat World and OER means to them and to us. And in year 3, we'll move forward with this idea of a personal learning environment. And at this point, the textbook may have been fragmented and exploded into a core collection of modular content. These content modules will be identified in terms of their relevance to different learning styles, and we'll combine the efforts of faculty and students to self-select materials for their third-year textbook. And as we go forward, we try not to lose sight of the fact that we think that faculty autonomy and student choice have to underline everything we do. The faculty select the book, the student chooses the format and construction that best serves their needs. And our hope is that we can work collaboratively with our content creators, distributors, and faculty to meet the underlying goals of our students. So thank you for listening to these opening words, and I'd like to turn it over to Eric Frank to continue his discussion of open educational resources in Platform. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Darlene and Steve. So I'm going to step back a little bit and talk a little bit about the textbook publishing industry from which I came, and talk about how we arrived at the place where the $200 textbook is becoming the norm. And from there we'll move to the emerging solution of open textbooks, what they mean, give you a hands-on sense of what they really are, and then we'll hear from Sue Schiller to talk about her experience in using an open textbook in her class. So we're going to do a little history lesson. I think the 1980s, I think of it in publishing as the decade of feet on the street. Publishers went from small academically oriented enterprises to large corporate-owned entities striving for competitive advantage. And the primary source of competitive advantage through the 80s was bigger and more professional sales organizations. Well, this had the effect of driving up costs of the end product with negligible value to the end learner, the student. In the 90s, there was a wave of consolidation, and all of that advantage was negated as the publishers there were only a few standing, and they were about the same size. So I think of the 90s as the decade of the nuclear arms race of supplements. That's when we as publishers would say we need to send our reps in and say we have something they don't have, and that's why you should adopt our book. And the costs of the overall product and all the supplements got baked into the core book. Costs went up again with negligible value to the end user. So we arrive at this place in the early 2000s where I think there's a substantial value gap in the market. On one side of this value gap are students. They're becoming more digitally savvy, more connected, but also importantly, they are coming to the university with less family income than any generation before them in the history of the United States, and they work more hours while they're in school to support their ability to be there than any generation prior. And so that's the student we have on one side of the value gap, and on the other side we have a product that just keeps getting increasingly unaffordable. I've listed the prices from publisher websites of 5 leading books in core introductory markets, and you can see that we're arriving at or surpassing the $200 mark as the norm. If you look at this over time, over a 20-year period, what you see is this line at the bottom represents consumer price index or inflation over a 20-year period. The top line represents the rise in the cost of tuition and fees, and this represents the rise in the cost of textbooks. Taken collectively, this is a tremendous amount of financial pain for a college-going student. And that pain is not evenly distributed. The Department of Education says if you're at a 2-year public community college and you're paying X for tuition and fees, you're paying 72% of X for textbooks. If you're at a public institution, you're paying 4-year institution, you're paying 26% of X. I don't think that anybody thinks that paying a quarter up to 3/4 of your out-of-pocket expenses for higher education towards textbooks are reasonable numbers. And that financial pain is actually creating dropouts. It's like the student Steve referenced in his remarks, that those stories are all over the place. The Gates Foundation just funded a study, and they interviewed 600 students who dropped out of college to try to assess what were causing them to drop out. And the two most important numbers that jumped off the page as having impact, or two issues, were this. The cost of textbooks and other fees besides tuition affected me financially, and I had to work as well, and it was too stressful trying to do both. When you read the subtext of what students said, they're saying, I'm actually not buying the book, and therefore I'm falling further behind in my coursework, so I have the brains, I don't have the resources. or I'm working more hours to be able to afford the books, and therefore I'm now dealing with the stress of juggling both of those schedules. In either case, it's causing people to literally drop out of college. And so students are feeling a lot like our friend here, angry and frustrated. And this is where that value gap that they're feeling meets the Internet, and the industry has been really disrupted and affected by the Internet, as has other media industries around it. What I mean by that is that angry and frustrated student searches the Internet for an alternative to an expensive new book. They find them in increasing numbers every year. They find more used books as that market becomes more rational and efficient, and big players like Amazon have stepped into the mix. They find more global gray market books. Many of you may have noticed students using an international edition of a book that has a different cover and the same interior. And it was sold in Southeast Asia for $17. It's sold in Southeast United States for $170. And the Internet has created a supply chain where students are buying those, and they're making their way back to the United States and displacing the North American sale. And increasingly, we've seen the Napsterization of publishing. Literally students creating scanned illegal PDFs and putting them up on pirate sites and transferring them to one another through peer-to-peer architectures. And so as these things occur in greater numbers every year, publishers are selling less new books every year. This, of course, is making publishers in the industry very nervous. And so what we were doing in the industry was acting rational, which was, hey, we need some ideas to preserve revenue in the face of our falling unit sales each year. And the easiest thing to do all the time is raise prices faster. I have less paying customers, but if I charge more to those I still have, I can preserve my revenues. And price increases in the industry have gone from on average 4% a year to over 10% a year over the past couple of years. The other strategy we were employing is to say, how can we create an environment where the student needs to come to us, the publisher, to purchase the new product? And that's by customizing and bundling things with the textbook. I create a unique ISBN at each institution where it's being ordered, and the student is unable to find that alternative product on the Internet. And so they are forced to go and purchase the new product, which is being distributed through the publisher. And then everybody's favorite, the new edition phenomenon. Here's our friend the author getting on the treadmill. The new edition manuscript machine is getting cranked up faster and faster every year. And what's happening is that new editions, which used to come out on average every 4.5 years, are now coming out 18 to 24 months at most in new editions, which of course ends up on faculty's desk. They're now revising notes and feeling frazzled about the fact that the changes were often superficial and not driven by changes in the world, but driven by market problems faced by the publisher. And so I could have skipped all of that and summarized the status of the industry right now as nobody's happy. I think students are angry. I think faculty are feeling like unwilling participants in a broken market. And I think that authors are wondering, as the creators of the underlying intellectual property, what's the future of the business when I only get paid on a new book and increasingly students are consuming everything but? And so I think open textbooks are beginning to emerge as the most transformative potential solution to the textbook conundrum in which we find ourselves. So I want to start by defining what is open, because I think it's probably a little understood term as it's applied to something like a textbook. It's an intellectual property rights issue. It's a legal issue. And that's really, in the end, all that it is. So we've all lived in a world of copyrighted material, and we will continue to live in such a world for the foreseeable future. When something is copyrighted, it's published, and let's take a textbook as our example, it's made available to the public under a copyright license that we don't think of all the time, but it's there in our lives. It's called all rights reserved. And that means that all rights to that material are reserved to the holder of the copyright. We have fair use rights, but that's really how we're able to use it, under fair use provisions while all rights are reserved. Historically, if a copyright holder didn't want to reserve all the rights to themselves, they said, I would like the users of my textbook to have the ability to do more with it. The only choice they had was to give up all of the rights to it, in essence, to make it part of the public domain. And that, in essence, means no rights are reserved to the copyright holder. That generally is an unacceptable solution to most who at least want attribution, oftentimes would like to get some form of compensation, etc. And so as the Internet is becoming a more important medium for the creation, distribution, and consumption of all kinds of content, textbooks included, legal scholars, led by those at Stanford and Harvard, said we need something in the middle. Copyright holders should be able to make their works available and reserve some rights to themselves and give some more rights to the users. So when someone talks about an open textbook, or an open education resource, what they're really talking about is a resource or a textbook to which the rights are held by somebody, and that somebody, be it an individual or a publisher, is publishing it and making it available to the rest of us with some rights reserved to them and some more rights given to us. So what are the rights that a copyright holder might want to give to us to make the value of the textbook or the educational resource go up in our eyes? Well, I call these the 4 R's of openness. So one is, when something is open, generally we have the right to reuse it, to copy and to use verbatim copies, something that you cannot do with all rights reserved works. We have the right to redistribute or share those copies with others. And I think most importantly are the last 2 R's, the right to revise and to remix. In essence, we have the right to take a work which has been created in its full complete form, and now adapt it, rework it, and improve it to make it better for our own purposes. I suspect if all of us thought about the perfect textbook, you'd recognize we've never found it. And that's because all of us want to make some modifications to improve a textbook for our own purposes, whether that's reorganizing it, whether that's just deleting things we don't cover, whether that's adding notes and annotations in there for our students, whether that's adding links out to readings, whether that's integrating our own case study that we may have written, swapping out some examples that aren't relevant and putting in more locally relevant or culturally relevant examples, and the list can go on and on. Open works give you the right to revise, and they also give you the right to remix, which is in essence taking one existing open work and being able to mix it with something from another open work. So a simple example would be a chapter from one textbook mixed with a chapter from another, or an open simulation available out there that's perfect to embed after a chapter in my open textbook, an open case study that I want to integrate into my open textbook. And the idea is to create something new and improved for our own purposes. Where do open textbooks come from? I think primarily in the early days of the movement, starting really in earnest a decade ago, but much more recently ramping up, are individuals, just faculty who've said, I would like to make my book that I'm writing or that I've written available under these new open under this new open license. And so you saw a lot of individuals beginning to put their materials online, which really led to the rise of aggregators, largely funded by some leading foundations who've said, well, if people are going to make them available, we should create platforms where they can all be housed, where one can go and search all of the different things being added to that platform, maybe be able to put things together to create something new, and then be able to distribute it to our students. And some of those platforms are things like Connections at Rice University or Merlot at Cal State. They're really a collection of the contributions of individuals that are now searchable and, in essence, aggregable. And now, I think, with the arrival of players like Flat World Knowledge, we see professional publishing operations starting to be built around sustainable, commercial open models. And what I'm going to do is provide a case study of sort of what we do at Flat World Knowledge so that you can get your hands really around this concept of what's possible when you apply open to a textbook. We view the world as having 3 primary constituents, authors, faculty, and students. And so we're trying to build our model around those 3 core constituents. For authors, or out of authors, come quality textbooks. So the first principle or foundation of our open model is to provide quality textbooks that are indistinguishable from market-leading textbooks available today so that nobody's stepping backwards in terms of quality. Specifically, by quality textbooks, I mean these 3 things. One is that we seek top scholars or researchers in their field and get them to write an exclusive textbook for Flat World Knowledge. So we can't take an existing book they've written at McGraw-Hill, for example, who owns the rights to that, but that person can write another book in an area where they are an expert and haven't yet written a textbook. So we seek out the same top scholars and authors that the industry has always done historically. We professionally develop, meaning we do all of the extensive peer reviewing that a professional publisher does, all of the professional illustration, editing, design, and everything that goes into making a market-leading textbook. And we support those books with some key instructor resources like test banks, print desk copies, instructor manuals, PowerPoint lecture slides, test banks that are integrated into one's learning management system. All of that is really just about getting on the playing field, because I think if you don't do that, you're actually not on an equal playing field with traditional published textbooks. But once you do that, oh, and I just wanted to sort of point out, if you look at the early users across a wide range of schools, you'll see plenty of schools that would tell you, I think, that the quality of materials that are coming out of this Flat World Open model are comparable to leading textbooks being published at traditional publishers. Now is where we flip the whole traditional model completely on its head. For faculty, we're saying we license the book to you and to use under an open license. We provide a Creative Commons license that transfers those 4 R's, those 4 rights that I described a moment ago, from us as publisher and our authors to you as user. And we give you a platform to be able to actually easily manipulate and modify the text very quickly to make it an improved work for your own course. Quick example of what that means. So for example, if you were looking at our Introduction to Business book, you said, I would like to customize this book. You can click, but you can drag and drop chapters or sections into a new order and put them where you cover them. Delete anything that you don't cover at the click of a button. You can go to an individual section of a textbook and say, I'd like to add notes to my students. And so you go into that section, click a box, open up a dialog box, type in whatever you want to say to your students. And by saving that, you are now creating your own materials, demarcated as yours, but integrated into the book, which will show up for students in every format of the book that they want to read, which I'll talk about in a moment. Coming in December this year, you'll also have the ability to insert a new chapter. By clicking a button, you could upload a document and then move it anywhere in the book you want it to be included. And you can go to any individual chapter or section and edit down to the sentence level. So everything in the book becomes editable, from section titles to learning objectives to individual paragraphs. So if I wanted to edit something in this paragraph, I simply click it, open up an integrated editor, make the kinds of changes that I want to make. Let's say put in a link to something or change a definition a little bit to match the one I use on my exam, and then go ahead and save my changes. Can also insert between paragraphs to add new things like new paragraphs or bulleted lists. And I think really interestingly is going to be the way people are able to integrate multimedia. So if I wanted to integrate a video clip in the book, I can do it as easily as adding a title in a box, putting the URL from YouTube or Blip TV of where that video resides, describing it, and providing a citation. And by clicking Save, all of that information makes its way right into the book instantaneously and is available for students to experience. With the live video player, your description, your citation lives at the end of the chapter, and you've instantly integrated media of interest to you and your students. When you're done and you say, this is ready for my class, I've spent an hour or two and I've got it just the way I want it, I click Publish this book. And our system will automatically create a new table of contents, a renumbered index, and renumber all the pages, in essence, make a linear, cohesive book. And then from that, we'll generate a whole bunch of formats your students will be able to choose from web-based books to printed books to print-it-yourself files that the students can download and print, to books on mobile readers, to audiobooks that they can listen to accessible books that students with print disabilities are able to access. And I'll talk a little bit more about the model for students getting to all that in a minute. And this is just an example of a professor at the University of New Hampshire who took that Introduction to Business book and said, I teach that course, but for my 850 students, I teach the course with an emphasis on sustainability and corporate responsibility and public policy. And so this is actually our original book, but what you might not notice is these 2 chapters are written by that individual professor at the University of New Hampshire, integrated directly into the book on Chapter 3 and 4, and they look exactly like the rest of our book as our system applies design to the words that were added by that individual professor. Dr. Scott Hunt, who's head of an economics committee at Columbus State Community College, where they use our Principles of Economics books for over 1,000 students a year, just went through a revision process with the committee, and his quote after they were done was, "In all the years I've been a professor, we've never had the perfect book. Now we do, and it's affordable." So that's really the core value proposition to faculty, in addition to the fact that we provide faculty students with a whole bunch of affordable choices. So what's the model around students? And this also will answer the question I'm sure many of you have, which is, okay, how do you support this? How do you sustain it? How do you make money from a model like this? Well, the first thing we're doing is we're giving away a free textbook. That is a student's first point of entry. It is literally a free web-hosted textbook and freely available accessible versions for students with print disabilities. So if they're logged on and they're on the internet, anybody in the world today could go to our catalog and access and read 100% of the textbooks that are posted there. So that's choice number one, is I can read a free book. The way we make money, and this is just a description of Free to Everyone that was written up in the Chronicle about our making books available to students with print disabilities. The way we make money is we give a lot of choices around free to students. What we know about students is that they don't all have the same learning style. They don't all have the same budgets. They don't all have the same lifestyles. And so if we offer alternative choices around free at reasonable prices, what we find is that 55% of those students who are using a Flat World book end up buying a format versus using the free online book. And this is how we make money while we're offering free. The most commonly purchased thing is a book. It's a print softcover book in black and white or in full color for $30 or $60. And the student can either purchase it direct from Flat World, or they can purchase it through a bookstore who's placed a common bulk order and stock the books on the bookshelves. And in fact, today, the majority of our revenue is actually books being ordered through bookstores and being purchased by students at the bookstore. Students can also purchase an audiobook by the book or by in the individual chapter, purchase PDFs that they can download and put on a device or print, purchase an e-reader format, which means that it'll be playable or readable on their iPad, Kindle, Sony Reader, Barnes & Noble, Nook, the No, the Entourage, or any other host of e-readers hitting the market today, and an iPhone version. So our whole principle here is to be platform agnostic. We don't want to make the choice about how a student should read or learn or how much they should pay. We want to give them a range of file formats and prices from free to color print books and let them make the selection themselves. We also offer study aids that we sell to students either at $15 for the whole course for all of them or $1.99 per chapter. A student can purchase additional things like audio study guides, online quizzes, and digital flashcards for each chapter of each book that we provide. So from a student's point of view, they come in and they search for their proper class, and once they get there, the message they get is your professor chose the book, you choose the format and price from black and white or color books to audio books to print it yourself to ebooks, or just go ahead and read free online. I think the benefits are pretty significant in the model. I think for authors, they actually can earn more income, and it's counterintuitive. Happy to answer questions about this in the Q&A, but our authors basically are selling to less students, 55% of the students in the class versus about 60 to 65% of students in the traditional model. And they're selling at a lower price point. An average purchase at a Flat World site is $34. But we don't have all of the erosion of used books and pirated copies and everything else. So by 4 semesters of a professor using a Flat World book, into the course, our authors actually start to earn more income because we pay them a 20% royalty on every penny that we earn around their open textbook, whether it's a study aid or a print book, versus the traditional model, which pays them on average 12% and sort of drops off a cliff after the first semester based on used and other. Authors get a lot of other benefits, like an opportunity to gain market share in competitive markets by providing real value to students and faculty. Customers that are probably more loyal because as they change the book, they're more and more satisfied with it, like Scott Hunt at Columbus State, and are less likely to leave. behavioral data about what kinds of changes people are making in our books, and so they can become better authors, and they get to make a positive social impact. Faculty get to maintain the quality of what they're doing today, but they get control that they've never had before, control of timing, of when and if they want to move to new editions, and most importantly, control of content. What exactly do I want to deliver in my class? Easier integration into online tools like learning management systems, and of course, you're solving the affordability and access problem for your students. And for students, they of course get free access. They get affordable choices around free. They get immediate access if they registered today. 1 minute later, the materials are available to them. They get to select something that meets their learning style. And potentially, and this is a question mark because it needs a real longitudinal study to prove it, but potentially they may start to complete courses and coursework in higher and higher rates as we remove that cost barrier. And so you can see today we have over 100 leading authors under contract, 1,300 faculty users, and over 150,000 students this year using open textbooks. So I asked that question hypothetically, will they retain more effectively? And I'm going to show a quick case study from Cerritos College, and then we're going to turn it over to Dr. Schiller to talk about her experience at Wright State. At Cerritos College is a college outside of Los Angeles, and they decided that their hypothesis was if students are dropping out because of the high cost of textbooks, if we remove that barrier, then they should stay in higher numbers. So they piloted 3 open textbooks in 3 introductory business courses. And the results were published by, by Linda Lacey, who's the president of Cerritos College, in a journal recently. And what they highlighted was that in those 3 courses where they changed nothing, same instructors, same syllabus, same everything, different book, that the retention rate went up between 10 and 15% across those 3 courses. And as you can see, the quote, "For an educator, it doesn't get any better than that," reflect their surprise that the hypothesis actually came true in such a clear and resounding way. And you can see why when there's a student that was quoted at the end of the article, and she said, "It's the cost of the books that hit the pocketbook more than anything. Having access to the text online for free or the choice to buy a copy for $30 instead of $100 is a great incentive for continuing my education." Another student there talked about how for every time he used a Flat World book in that course, he actually had enough money left in his pocket to pay for his credits for the next course, because this is a community college where credit costs were low. So with that, I want to turn it over to Dr. Schiller to talk about her experience with open textbooks at Wright State University. Dr. Schiller, it is yours.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Thank you, everyone, for being here this afternoon. I am Sue Schiller, and I work at Wright State University. We're located in Dayton, Ohio. I teach information systems courses in College of Business. And every quarter, I teach multiple courses. And the one that I'm using, Flat World Knowledge Open Textbook, is one of the courses, which is the information systems course in the MBA program. I don't have a slide this afternoon, but I'd just like to take a few minutes to share with you my own experiences of using the Flat World Knowledge Open Textbook. I'm going to do that from 3 things. First of all, from my students' perspective, and then from my own experience and perspective. And then before I conclude, I'd like to share some numbers sort of from the financial perspective. So first of all, from my students' perspective, very recently I collected some feedback from my students. So I asked them about your experiences and what do you enjoy the most of using the open textbook from Flat World Knowledge. So these are the things I collected from my students. First of all, almost everyone said that they love the pricing model of this open textbook. Now I want to point out that they did not only say that the free online textbook, they did mention it's the pricing model. And I like to agree with that because every time I teach the class, considering these are MBA students in their, probably late 20s, mid-30s, or some of them probably even older, not everybody prefers the complete reading textbook, a free version on the website. And about half of my students, they love it so much of being able to read the textbook totally free on the website. And then the other half of my students prefer other options of, for example, downloading the PDF version of the textbook or even printing it out themselves. because we do have to address different types of learning styles and learning preferences of students. So in other words, my students love the varieties of the pricing model that's provided by the Flat World Knowledge. The second point that came from my students is the convenience. It is so convenient to be able to read the textbook online. And these days, probably everybody should be aware of the advance of internet technology. And also because of distance learning and so forth, in the higher education, there are more and more faculty moving to using and utilizing the web-based technologies for teaching and learning. So the Flat World Knowledge is providing the open textbook, which is a wonderful solution to all my students. Lots of my students, they do travel. And a couple of weeks ago when I was having my class, some students told me that, believe it or not, they were actually taking their laptops with them traveling, so they could absolutely open up the web and read my textbook chapters and work on the case studies and work on the teamwork projects. But compared to this, if it was in a very old traditional way, students told me that they would not take about the old textbook in a version of 25 pounds or ish. And that would not be a convenient solution for students, especially when they're traveling on the road. So the convenience of the access to such web-based content provided by Flat World Knowledge is absolutely superior to my students. And the third perspective for my students is absolutely that they can have the most up-to-date content from the textbooks published by Flat World Knowledge. I say that is also because I used it myself. It has been about 2 years, and I can tell you, because I teach technology, and technology advances very, very fast. When we are teaching these content in the classroom, we have to, as a faculty, we have to constantly update the information, update the cases, update the relevant, any kinds of resources attached to the knowledge that we're teaching in the classroom. And being able to provide the most updated content from this model is loved by my students. For instance, I use case studies in my courses, and that is a very, very typical way of teaching in MBA classes. And the textbook that I'm using, which I will talk more about from my perspective after this, include case studies from Google, for example, Netflix, the social network, Facebook, the company, Zara, a very successful fashion company who's using technology in amazing ways. And these are the cases that are very new and very, very relevant to the course content that I am teaching. So being able to teach these most updated information in my class has helped my students so much to understand what is going on these days, currently, right now, in the real world, instead of waiting 2 years or 3 years or 4 years even sometimes reading the textbook, but then only realize that information is already out of date. So those are the 3 points from my students that I've collected. Now, from my own experience, it is quite an interesting story how I got into Flat World Knowledge. About almost 2 years ago, I heard John Gallagher, a colleague from Boston College, and he was writing a textbook. And not only he was writing a textbook, this textbook was different. It's a book that's open content to the students, will be published online, and it will be very easy for faculty to adopt. So I got very, very excited. All I thought was, okay, my students now can have a very attractive free model for them to read the textbooks. So I wrote an email to John Gallagher and said, I'm very excited that you're writing a textbook for students and from their perspective. So I guess John Gallagher must got very excited too, because he actually recruited me as a reviewer for the first version of his textbook. The book is called Information Systems, a Manager's Guide to Harnessing Technology. And very soon after that review process was finished, his book was published online. It's available to everybody who comes to Flat World Knowledge to use the textbook. So from my experience of almost 2 years using the textbook from Flat World Knowledge, I think that there's 3 things really truly stand out from a faculty's perspective. First of all is that it's very, very easy for me to choose the book among the selections of the available titles from Flat World Knowledge. I teach information systems or information technology in this area, and there are many other textbooks available written by the the best colleagues from that field. So if you're interested, I really encourage you, just go to the website and see their catalog. Log into the catalog and to see what kind of titles are provided from Flat World Knowledge. And I believe they really encourage faculty to get involved in this writing textbook process as well, just like what Eric just mentioned a few minutes ago. So maybe you can be part of that team as well. And the second part, from my experience, is the technology that supports Flat World Knowledge textbook is superior. The main web portal for students and faculty to use, as what you have seen from Eric's presentation, is really well designed. The web team is always there available to help faculty if you have any questions or issues or any concerns about the use of the textbook. Students log in from students' account, and it's absolutely free. There's no cost to students at all. And the students can see the list of courses that they can search by school, they can search by the title, they can also search by the professor's last name and so forth. So very easy for them to use. And for faculty, after faculty log in, you will be able to see not only the textbooks that you're using right now, you can see all the textbooks or in different versions that you have used in the past. So if you want to copy notes, for example, or if you want to adopt some of the content that you've used before, it's very easy for faculty to just drag and drop to the new textbook that you're customizing. As Eric demonstrated, I personally love that drag and drop option to reorganize the sequences of your chapters. Every time I teach the course, it's somewhat different. And I need to add in new content. I need to update links to some of my notes and so forth. But the web portal has been very, very helpful for me and make it very easy for me to update any of the content right inside the website. So I don't have to worry about any of these technical issues. I know that some other faculty probably, if you don't use web-based resources that much, I'm trying to say that even with that, considering that it's very easy for anybody to learn, you probably spend about half an hour, but you will get very familiar with the interface, and it's quite easy for you to get around and to find the textbook and to start the customizing process. And the web team from